The Know Nothing Guide to Understanding Your Air Conditioner. Hosted by Michael Corville. Hi everybody, my name is Michael Corville and I'm your host on today's episode of the Know Nothing Guide. Today's episode, Understanding Your Air Conditioner. Now air conditioners are everywhere, from where we live to the cars we drive to pretty much anywhere people congregate indoors, you'll find an air conditioner. But what do we really know about air conditioners? Not much. In fact, most of us don't really appreciate air conditioners until they go out and we're forced to do without them for a little while. So come on, let's go figure out how they work. To really understand how air conditioners work, it's important to understand the refrigerant cycle. But what is the refrigerant cycle? And for that matter, just what is a refrigerant? So you've probably heard about refrigerants before, but just what is a refrigerant? Look, it's simple. A refrigerant is nothing more than a chemical used to absorb, transport, and release heat under predetermined conditions. And modern refrigerants do just that very, very well. It's refrigerant that makes cooling your home possible. Now that we've defined what a refrigerant is, what about the refrigerant cycle? The refrigerant cycle is the path that the refrigerant takes inside the air conditioner that allows it to return to its point of origin. While the AC is running, the refrigerant is constantly flowing through the refrigerant cycle. It's this cycle that is the path that we will follow today to better understand how an air conditioner works. So the first component of the air conditioning system that we'll start on our path around the refrigerant cycle is the compressor. This is what a compressor looks like in captivity. And this is what a compressor looks like in its natural habitat. You can think of the compressor as the heart of your refrigeration system. In fact, it does the same function. What it does is it actually pumps the refrigeration through the refrigerant cycle. And it does this via copper tubing. You can see the smaller of the two is the discharge line. The refrigerant is actually leaving the compressor and going to the condensing unit, whereas the larger line, the compressor is sucking from the house into itself so that it can continue pumping. Now that we know about the function of the compressor, where does the refrigerant cycle lead us to next? Of course, it's the condenser coil. And this is what condenser coils look like. When most people think about their air conditioner, this is actually what they think about. And this is really the housing for your condenser coils. This is your air conditioning unit. Open up so that you can see the condenser fan motor, which when it's spinning, it's drawing the atmosphere across the condenser coils and discharging that heat into the atmosphere. The heat you feel coming off of the unit when it's running was in your home just a few minutes prior. But where does the refrigerant come from? Let's go inside and take a look. Inside the house we find the air handling unit, and again we see the small copper line and the large copper line. This large copper line is leaving the evaporator coil and making its way to the outside compressor. The small refrigerant line is actually refrigerant entering the air handling units. So what comes next is the thermostatic expansion valve. So we move on to the thermostatic expansion valve. Don't let the name fool you. This mushroom-shaped valve has a very simple job. And although it's one of the smallest components of the air conditioning system, it has one of the biggest jobs. It acts as a restrictive point in the refrigerant cycle so that the refrigerant enters the evaporator coil as a low-pressure liquid. In essence, it keeps the refrigerant cycle running efficiently. Now that we've seen the thermostatic expansion valve, it's time to move on to the final component of the refrigeration cycle, the evaporator coil. This is the picture of an extremely clean, extremely new evaporator coil. The evaporator coil is where the lungs of the house actually take in air. Air travels across the coil in reverse operation of what we discussed in the condenser unit. Heat from the air is absorbed into the coil itself and through these refrigerant lines brought back outside. When we change the air filter in the house, this is what we're protecting. From here, it's back to the compressor. Today we learned what the refrigerant cycle is and how that cycle runs its course through your air conditioning system in order to keep you cool. To recap, we begin with the refrigerant leaving the compressor and entering the condenser coil to be pumped through the expansion valve, arriving in the evaporator coil on its way back to the compressor. Once again, I'm Michael Corville, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on our trip around the refrigerant cycle.